Today on Locked On Canadiens, can you fix the Habs power play?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1153. That's a mouthful. We want to thank everyone for making us your first listen of the day every day. As you know, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Ian Waver, also known as Maybe It's Ian. Ian, it is our mailbag is tomorrow. I'm excited for that episode, but there's so much to cover today. It is kind of a rainy night here, a rainy Wednesday night. How are you doing on your end?
There was no news other than the no supplemental discipline to Arber Xhekaj. It was a relatively quiet day for the Montreal Canadiens, and for that I am thankful.
Yes.
We've lived through a year of news in the past 3 days, and I need to sleep. Like we can't keep doing this.
Well, that's the thing. You were saying there was no news, and I was about to say, wasn't it great? All summer long, we were like, we need news. We want to talk about some stuff. All right, so let's revisit the Arber Xhekaj thing, because we talked about it, and I think, as with any player, but particularly a player as beloved as Arber Xhekaj, like there were a lot of different takes, and some people like strongly disagreed with us, which is totally fair and totally fine. We're not all the same person, but there's one thing I took issue to is that people called us Arber Xhekaj haters, and neither one of us is that. So that's like, people are like, don't focus on the negative comments. Like that is outright slander right there. We both love Arber Xhekaj. So
yeah, he rules.
He does.
You know why I know he rules? Because at the end of the day, I'm arguing for him to stop taking dumb penalties because I want to see him play more hockey.
Yeah.
Why is that a bad take? I don't understand that. Like, I don't want him to play a minute and a half and then take a shower. Like, that's not fun for anybody.
Yeah. I fully agree with you. So, okay. So like today is like day 2 after all of that. The dust has settled a little bit. And I think, when you look at like different angles to that Stützle hit, like, and again, we felt it was late and we felt it was high, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was like jutting out his elbow, trying to slam Tim Stützle in the face. Like, unfortunately for Tim Stützle, like he hit himself with his own stick as part of that Xhekaj hit. Like, and so, upon reviewing it, I think the biggest reason Arber Xhekaj was sent off was to prevent shenaniganery, which didn't really work because there were other players squaring off and targeting each other. But I think like one thing that I do want to say though is like when we're talking about Arber Xhekaj, we're saying to pick your spots. We're not saying don't be who you are. We're saying use your skill more than your brawn and use the brawn when it is required. Like that's the point we're trying to make. So when you look at that hit, second day, there were a bunch of angles. People were zaprudering it. I love Habs fans because you get to revisit and relive this stuff all the time, over and over again, all day. No, I don't think that this was a hit that required any supplemental discipline, but I think, 2 games in a row in which he was thrown out, I was thinking that they would probably review it, particularly since he was fined last game. And for me, I think people kind of talk about like, whether or not he hit a star. Like, let's be really honest. The Department of Player Safety, they say that they don't care, but who a guy hits is important when they're giving out discipline. So that's why I was worried, right? Like Tim Stützle is one of the most important players on the Ottawa Senators, right? I wouldn't say the most because they've got a lot of components there, but to me, like that does matter. Like whether or not the league takes it seriously matters when it's more of a star. They look at like how bad the injury is, at least they admit that part, but they also look at who got hit. So that's why I thought, like they would take a second look. And I think the officials did not do the right thing by letting the game get to that point. But when it did get to that point, they did the right thing by throwing him out so that, people weren't targeting him all night after that.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's not much of a difference between the hit that Ridley Gregg threw and the one that Arber Xhekaj threw. And Gregg gets called for a major because they didn't call it a penalty at first at all. And the major is the mechanism for which they can review it and call it a minor penalty, which they did. But Xhekaj does the same thing later and gets tossed. And I still think that was the right decision because all of these hits exist within the context that they live in. Like that, none of these are in a vacuum. Gregg started all of this. He did. Like that's the one thing with all of this that both sides can agree on is that all of this starts with that hit on Doc. Gregg doesn't that hit didn't live with the context of this game is one, face-off aggression away from a line brawl, right? Like, so I thought he was going to get a couple games, honestly, because, player safety just fined him and to turn around and be like, dude, why am I talking to you again? Like, what? Again, you were just here yesterday, So I think I don't know what player safety does all day. I genuinely don't. Like, not a single suspension has ever made sense. Maybe the Rafi Torres one, but that was like 20 years ago. Who cares? Like, I don't know what they do all day.
They make things up as they go along, I think.
Yeah.
They're like literally sitting there making fanfic about what they're going to do next.
Yeah. And, to go kind of full circle on, I think the Arber Xhekaj take from last episode for the everydayers out there, that I think set a lot of people off was me saying that I don't think he's going to make this team. Well, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Montreal Canadiens are over the salary cap and they don't want to put Carey Price on LTIR. So outside of all of this shenaniganery, there was a reason to send him to Laval because they need
also,
Yeah, go ahead.
He doesn't have to go through waivers right now.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to go through waivers. That was a lot. Like, there are a lot of people were talking about that. Like, he would absolutely immediately get plucked off waivers if the Canadiens did that. But right now, they have that advantage where he does not have to go through waivers.
Right. And Xhekaj is at the disadvantage of two things. One, he had a terrible training camp. And two, the other three defensemen on this team, that don't require waivers are Lane Hutson. He's playing. Caden Gooley. That's funny. He's never going back to Laval. And Jaden Struble, who shouldn't go back to Laval because he played better than Xhekaj. So
he played so well. Like, he earned that spot.
Yeah, the thing about Struble that I love towards the end of that game against Ottawa is people were starting to almost flip the narrative on the game a little bit and be like, wow, Jaden Struble's playing an incredible game. For him to have those moments in that chaos, he's going to fit right in on this roster for those first 3 games because those games are not going to be fun. So look, we are not Arber Xhekaj haters. We need to stomp that out immediately. We're disappointed not in that he responded, but in the way that he did respond. I think we made that clear. If we didn't, we're making it clear now. You can respond. You know how I know that? Kirby Dach responded. He fought Ridley Gregg at the end. He picked his spot. You know what I would love for Arber Xhekaj to become? The guy that somebody else jumps. Run your mouth the entire game. Drive the other team nuts. And then when they finally lose it, you turn into the monster that you are. Like that would be an effective way of being that kind of player. Right now, he's the aggressor. Like, everyone's talking about enforcers being deterrents. He's the enforcer that other people are going to have to deter, but they might not even want to because he's going to get himself tossed out of the game. So, I think now that all of this is over, the dust is settling, we can take a deep breath and never talk about this again. Until Saturday when they play Ottawa again.
Yeah. There's gonna be something in that game. And that's what I was dreading, right? Like, this is why the first of 2 games there were a lot of shenanigans. I was like, this is just gonna be a continuation of that. And then it's not like last year where you get a bit of a break before you have to play Ottawa again. Like, literally, like the following Saturday, they have to play Ottawa again. So like, this is not like it's just gonna be a story that continues on and on. And that's what I'm a little bit nervous about. But speaking of those first 3 games for the Montreal Canadiens, there's a very consequential team that is currently going through a very consequential I'm going to call it a battle of attrition, but I think it's more dramatic than that. They're going through a soap opera right now, and we're going to talk about our old friends, the Boston Bruins, in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel so much. Why? Because they are America's #1 sportsbook. They're truly the place that you go when you're looking to place bets. And for NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is, as you know, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's all right there for you, and it's so easy to use. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You heard me right. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com. All right. So I kind of want to talk about this in the context of players waiting until the very last minute or even until after the season signs to sign their contract, but also how the teams themselves handle it. Because by and large, in the last few instances that I can think of, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, remember PK Subban? Now Jeremy Swayman of the Boston Bruins, or potentially another team soon, I don't know. You always hear a lot of noise from the team. And the team, like the message that's always coming out of the team is like the audacity of that player expecting to get paid what they're worth. Like that's always it, right? And then you hear from the players camp and it's like, we didn't ask for that much, or like, this is exaggerated, or, all of that. So like, I think it's really interesting that all summer long there, it wasn't all summer long leading up to the offseason. The question mark was which Boston Bruins goalie out of their admittedly excellent tandem were the Bruins going to choose. And then they did the inexplicable thing by trading one of said competent goaltenders to a division rival. Not only a division rival, one that's knocking on the doors of a playoff spot. If they don't lose the season in October or November, Ottawa is going to be a threat to the Boston Bruins, right? Yeah. And doing that is like, it feels like such an unthinkable decision, no matter what the return is. Like, I'm not going to make a division rival stronger if there's any way I can help it, right? And then not only that, but to like have these prolonged like silences between them and the goaltender they did choose to keep, and then protracted negotiations with them, with this goaltender. And it's all like, there's no contract. They don't have a starting goaltender. They've got a backup starting their games right now. And everyone in the world is making fun of the Boston Bruins. And not only that, Cam Neely goes out and makes a comment that gets I guess disputed by a notes app.
Yeah. Dude, that press conference with all of the Bruins brass up there, and he says, I have 64 million reasons he should sign. I don't know. I've never seen a hockey operations department act this way. Like they should be embarrassed, right? Like this is an embarrassing moment for that team. And again, who's at the center of all of it? The friggin' Ottawa Senators. Again, they must be, they are just grinning ear to ear about all of this because they traded for Linus Ullmark. And then I would imagine, Jeremy Swayman goes, my number just went up.
Yeah.
Because now you guys have no other option. What, Jonas Korpisalo is going to be your starting goalie? Yeah. Okay, cool. Good luck with that. I don't know how this ends, but I hope it doesn't end before Montreal plays Boston. So Jeremy, get every penny you want. You owe it to your other goalies, right? That's what I'm gonna say. Like he's resetting the goalie market.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And like for me, I'm always like pro player, go get yours. Like it's always like, oh, he's entitled, and it's no. We side with labor. We have so much more in common with labor than we do with those those owners, right? Like,
and I think the part about this for me is that it always seems to show itself that if you sign your RFAs early, the negotiations are painless. You end up getting them at a sweet deal because they don't have as much leverage at that point. Look at the Canadiens; they're good examples of that. Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki signed a year removed. Juraj Slafkovsky signed a year removed. Caden Gooley signed a year removed. All of those contracts are stellar, and they're going to continue to look great as it goes up. The Toronto Maple Leafs are an example of that not working, right? Like they didn't do that. They waited. I mean, William Nylander signed at the 11th hour on the day he needed to in order to remain active in the NHL that year. When you wait that long, these players are going to pants you. Like there's no other way around it. And that's not just true in hockey. It's absolutely true in the NFL. These players are going to training camp and holding out. And it's stupid because you know you're going to pay them. Like they're going to get the money. You're just doing this power play that has no, like, are we fighting over like 200 grand like per season? Is that what we're fighting over? Like just sign it. Like, I don't understand, like from the Bruins perspective, what they're doing. Like what good does any of this do to not only turn the fan base against a player, which has historically never gone well, and it's something they're guilty of in the past. Remember how Dougie Hamilton liked museums and they had to trade him because of it? Like what? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really funny because in this case, it's not working, right?
No.
Like the fan base is not mad at the goaltender. They're mad at the team. They're panicking and they're they're embarrassed for the team.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm very thankful that the Canadiens decided to get this business done early and that these players are extremely committed to this team.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's something we can't take for granted, especially as a Canadian market. Like I know Montreal is different than most of them, but to get Cole Caulfield to sign an extension in Montreal, like not a lot of college Americans are doing that in Canada. Right. Like Matt Tkachuk wanted out at the first shot. Rucker McGroarty, he didn't want to stick around. So there's examples of these players who just don't want to be around in Canada. It's a different experience. They don't like it. So, for Montreal to get all of those guys locked up, that's all I've been thinking of watching this Bruins drama unfold. And I can't wait until like Cam Neely walks out with a steel chair and just takes Jeremy Swayman out, because that seems like that's the sort of like drama that we're headed towards here. Yeah. Do you think there's any chance they trade him?
I don't think so at this point, because they need a goaltender, and like every other team at this point, like they've lost their leverage entirely.
Well, it's funny you mentioned they need a goaltender, because today they claimed Yuri Patera off waivers from the Vancouver Canucks. So I don't know, like that, if that's a play for leverage, boy, that's really bad. Like that's like, oh yeah, well, we got a third goalie another team didn't want, so we don't even need you. Good luck with that, Cam.
I mean, honestly, it is truly funny, and I hope it doesn't bite us in the butt, because like it's been a long time since like the Canadiens haven't been the laughing stock, right? Like the last couple of years with Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, the Canadiens have been making decisions where other teams are looking and they're like, damn, like they know what they're doing, and it has been so long. Like we lived a period where every single time there was a trade, like everybody would be making fun of us, or they'd be like, oh, look, they got another old guy that can play on the third line, right? But he has Stanley Cup experience. Like, so, to
that point, like the previous front office, Mark Bergevin's, he hardballed everybody that came into his office. Like,
you can't do that with everybody.
He hardballed negotiated Markov so bad he never played in the NHL again. He ran Alex Radulov out of town. He did this with PK Subban. He hardballed him and then bridged him going into that lockout shortened year. He held out for a little while, and then he said, okay, my number's 9. It's $9 million the next time I come up. He goes, yeah, okay, whatever. And then they get into negotiations for his next deal, and he goes, my number's 9. And they take him to arbitration, and at the 11th hour decide to sign the deal that he wanted all along. So it's just like, it should be a sign to everybody that bad general managers act like this. Like this is not something that successful teams do. So stop doing it.
Yeah. And we talk about like the Bruins, it feels like in the last couple of years, their success has come in spite of the bad decisions they've made. Right. Like they've lucked into a lot of that stuff. Like it's not, and I'm not saying like they don't have good players or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying like all of like they're making bad decisions, but they're still reaping rewards from it. So I think it's gonna be really interesting. Like it's possible that by the time we drop this episode, there will be a contract. But at this point, it feels like a good team, part of being a good team and a good front office is understanding your assets and managing them accordingly. Whether it is a player who will never be more than a third liner, but you trade him to a team where he's going to have, a good, like as a rental, he's going to have a good chance at winning a Stanley Cup or whatever it is, whether you're transparent like Kent Hughes was with Arturi Lehkonen before trading him, for all of those reasons, like, a player doesn't want to play in Montreal, he wants to help them find a different place, right? Being a player first organization doesn't necessarily hurt you because then you get a bunch of people willing to take a little bit of a discount, not less than their worth, but a little bit of a discount to stick around and buy into your plan. When you say, like, I'm committed to getting you guys a Stanley Cup winning roster that you can play with and win with, they believe you because you've always been honest, you've always treated them with respect and dignity, and you haven't made it play out in the media. And we haven't seen this yet from this front office, which is a really encouraging sign. Not to say it'll never happen, but I'm glad that it seems unlikely.
Yeah, totally agreed.
And so on that note, speaking of good decisions and bad decisions, I feel like the Canadiens need to make better decisions about their power play. So we're going to talk about that again in our last segment. All right. So this topic was sort of requested by my co-host, but also I always want to talk about it as well. I want to talk about the power play. I think let's just get the penalty kill out of the way. I feel like it's a little bit of a moot point until we figure out which players they're keeping on that defense because the composition of their defense like heavily affects the personnel on their penalty kill. But I think that last year, the fact that they were able to show improvement in it is a promising sign. It was not a long period of time. It was like from like February to like mid-March or end of February, I think, to like it was like a 6-week period, but they were able to really steadily improve it. So I have hope on that front. But the power play, it's driving me insane.
0 for 24. I mean, that says everything. And I know people,
Against
it's the
AHL
preseason
competition.
Yeah. Oh, it's the preseason. Yeah, it's the preseason for them too. And we got lit up for 4 against Ottawa. Like, what do you mean? I am less concerned with the result and more concerned with the process because the process is exactly the same as it was last year. Like, what is the point of a 6-game preseason and this long training camp if you're going to come back with the same idea that didn't work last year? And now Marty wears all of this. I think, this is going to be a season for him that, like, if this power play doesn't hold up, there's no Alex Burrows to share the burden of that with. It's going to fall squarely on the head coach. So, like, he has an incentive to really fix this outside of just like it's putrid to watch. It does not work. It didn't work last year. It doesn't matter what players are out there. They're not scoring. So, like, I'm very concerned about their viability as I'll call them a spoiler team, right? Like headed into the final weeks, like, oh, we just missed the playoffs, but we can, we're definitely good enough to be on the door next year. Like, I worry that this team is just going to let games get out of hand. The motto for this season is going to be you win games at 5-on-5 and lose them on special teams, because you look at that game against Ottawa, they scored 3 goals at 5-on-5 and none on the power play, and Ottawa went 4. They got all 4 of their goals on the power play. Like, that's how you lose.
And the thing is with the Montreal Canadiens, it's not like they have untalented players. Like, are you telling me out of the entire roster, which we know is not good enough to compete, or compete in the playoffs, are you telling me on that entire roster you can't put 5 players together that have the skill to pull this off?
Yeah. Yeah. Even without Patrick Laine, you now have Lane Hutson and you have Kirby Dach back.
Yeah.
Like, I know Lane Hutson's not playing on the top power play, but as we've discussed on previous episodes, there are not a lot of options now for Marty to pull on that first power play unit now that Laine is hurt. The one thing that I think he can do to affect change is to swap Matheson for Hutson. I don't think that'll necessarily be fair, but it's the one thing he can do personnel-wise before it's, you know what, we have to take this thing back, take a look under the hood and figure out why this isn't working.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of the drop pass, Laura. Laura, if I see one more drop pass, I hope it's my last one. Like they're doing the drop pass in the neutral zone when they're trying to enter, which I don't hate on its face, but one, everyone knows it's coming, and two, they drop pass it to a guy that isn't in the frame yet. Like he's chilling with Sam Montembeault, and they're like, here, now you pick it up with speed. But everybody knows that you're doing that, and also now the other 4 Montreal Canadiens are standing still at the blue line. They're playing
Waiting.
Red Rover. It doesn't work, and I'm just so over it. I really wanted Marty to come in with new ideas, and it just seems like it's the same stuff. It's October officially. I'm gonna give it some time, but like, I just want to see something better. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to score a bunch.
I would like to see one guy carry the puck into the offensive zone.
Yeah, well, we tried that. Now that guy's out 3 months. So, you know what I mean? Like it's
I know.
When it rains, it pours sort of thing. I don't know how much longer this is, feasible before they should hire a power play coach.
Yeah.
If you thought I was going to say fire Marty, I'm sorry. I don't fire Marty. That's not what I'm saying. Hire somebody to be a specialist to come in here and change this power play.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you, because I think, we're talking about like Martin St. Louis. He's also like this is his rookie coaching gig.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts on hockey, and he definitely sees it in a way where management thinks it's important for this team's development. But that doesn't mean that you can't, he called it a consultant, right? Like, he's got a consultant. This team has very deep pockets. Just hire a guy whose one job it is to do this, whether it's a video coach or like a coach on the bench with you. Just hire one person whose job it is to do this,
Yeah. The salary cap is the great equalizer for players. There is no salary cap on coaches. Go find somebody to fix this thing. Like,
call our friend Jesse Marshall and ask him to fix your power play.
Absolutely. Him and Alex Kovalev and Andrei Markov, and they'll all high five, and we'll go, we'll score on 100% of our power plays. I guarantee it.
All right, Ian, it is time for trivia.
It is. I'll refresh us on the last question. Again, we're sticking with Sens and Habs here as we round out the preseason. Last episode's question was, name the player: Hartford, New Jersey, Montreal, Ottawa. And Laura, we jumped in the room here and you told me the answer. So who is that player?
It is Sylvain Turgeon.
Correct.
However, I cannot take credit for this because Scott told me the answer.
He did. He texted me. He goes, "That's quite a pull." And I was like, that's very, I really appreciate that. That's the, in the remembering guys sphere, that's like the most fitting thing you can say.
Very much so. All right. So what's today's question?
Yeah, we'll stick again with former Sens and Canadiens. This list is long. Are you ready?
Okay.
We have Boston, New York Islanders, Tampa, Anaheim, Ottawa, LA, Montreal, Philadelphia, Winnipeg, Philadelphia again.
I know who this is. Can you repeat it again? I'm going to say it all again.
Boston, New York Islanders,
mm-hmm.
Tampa, Anaheim, Ottawa, LA, Montreal, Philadelphia, Winnipeg, Montreal.
Okay.
This is, I think a lot of people will get this one. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel for former Habs and Sens here. So
yes.
Thank God they only play one more time.
I know the answer to this question, but I'm not going to say it so I don't have to go back and edit. So you guys tell us what you think. Also, remember that tomorrow is our mailbag episode. So please subscribe to this podcast, wherever you get your podcast. That's one. 2, subscribe to us on YouTube. Tell your friends all about us, but please send us questions. You can do that. You can send them to us on Instagram. Somebody actually answered the question, today's question, I think it was, or yesterday's on Instagram. I love that. Locked On Canadiens. Send us your questions, LO_Canadiens on Twitter. LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. We love that. Like, send us emails. We've got plenty of really good emails. Please send us some more. What did I forget? You can leave them also in the YouTube comments. I told you to subscribe, etc. You can find me on social media at The Active Stick. You can find my co-host at Maybe It's Ian, and we will see you tomorrow with the mailbag.